Hello, welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the Casio Privia PX-5S. It's a full-size 88-key keyboard with piano sounds and other stuff, master keyboard, plus a 256-voice Hex Layer synthesizer. Quite a lot of stuff in there, I think you'll agree. Let's take a look. Right, so here it is. It's big. These are full-size keys, and they also are weighted. So you do get this kind of very much a piano feel. Though I have to say, they are a plastic quality. They are made of plastic. There's definitely a different sort of feel to them. And it's I guess the material they made it out of is the thing that saves the weight, because that's going to be the bulk of the weight in a keyboard like this. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but actually it feels pretty natural, and it does encourage you to play having this many keys. It's not terribly heavy, easily transportable. You could probably put it in a gig bag and it would give you, no backache whatsoever. So they've done a great job on the weight saving. Incidentally, in this bit here, there's also space for AA's. You can run the thing off batteries if you so desire. But let's come back here to this side, because this is the sort of heart of what you get to control. These can all be mapped to internal parameters, or they can be external parameters and transmit MIDI, of course, pitch bend and modulation. One thing worth mentioning, no aftertouch on the keyboard, it's just velocity, so let's not get too excited there. But when I come to the price, I think you'll sort of understand how that is. Right, so we have 4 zones across the keyboard. It can be split in velocity or in keys. You can also transmit out to external MIDI or the internal, so you can play, basically you could maybe plug an iPad into the USB and an external audio input. You can mix and match up, and you can also get these controllers to transmit or not transmit to zones. So you can map them to internal sound parameters, you can map them to external MIDI control or USB out the USB. Lots of ways of routing. So as a master keyboard, it's also quite flexible. So the PX-5S is a stage piano. Look, it says on the box right there, so it must be. So as such, it should have some decent piano sounds as well, but it also has a lot in common with the XW-P1 synthesizer that I reviewed last year, which has a lot of PCM playback. It's got phrase sequencing, it's got a little bit of record, it's also got a media player, an audio recorder as well. So there's a lot of other stuff in there besides just the pianos. So let's start with a piano sound. This is the Grand Piano Concert. Quite a nice sample. It sounds like there's a little bit of key off sound to it. Quite a nice dynamic. There are some other sounds, piano sounds in here as well. So more of a rock piano, different grand piano studio. LA piano, which seems to be, I'm not quite sure what that is, Billy Joel or something. Dance piano, more of your type thing. Grand piano bright, grand piano mellow, a bit of more of a mellow sound. So if we go back to the original piano, there's a little bit of reverb on there. And now if I press the sustain, you can hear that it's got a sort of string resonance sound to it. So you can hear the strings resonating. It's quite a broad, it feels like just a kind of cabinet sample, like the whole thing resonates. It doesn't feel like it's sympathetic to the notes that we're playing. So the piano is okay. It's not, what I call a really advanced piano sound, but it's quite nice. So looking around the back of the unit, we've got stereo mini jack in for audio in. I guess you can plug your iPad or something in there. Pair of headphone outputs. No separate level for those. Stereo line input. DC 12 volt power supply, which is included. Stereo line output, MIDI in and MIDI out through, plus 2 pedal connections. We've got a damper pedal and a secondary pedal as well, which are fully assignable. We've also got the USB, which gives us the MIDI over USB and is separately, again, separately assignable via each zone. Finally, as I mentioned, this can be battery powered. Just pick the top off there, and we've got 2, 4, 6, 8 AA batteries will power the unit. At the top level of the Privia is the stage setting. A stage setting is the settings for each of the 4 zones. That's the MIDI controller, the voice settings, the MIDI out, the velocity, all of that kind of stuff. Now, there, as well as the PCM voices that you have in here, which are your standard keyboard, strings, horns, drums, timp, that kind of thing. We've also got Hex Layer Voices. And Hex Layer Voices, if you remember from the P1, are essentially 6 oscillators, each with their own filters. It's almost like 6 mono synths, but they share the same common LFO and the same effects. But they can be played as a single voice. So you can stack them up, tune them, do all those kind of things. You can have up to 2 hex layers in a stage setting. So of your 4 zones, 2 of those can be hex layers. So that could give you up to 12 oscillators on a single note. But let's take a look at the hex layer in depth. Okay, so deep breath. We're starting with, this is a basic memory. Remember, this is a stage memory. So this has up to 4 zones I can edit. I've got Z1 on there. I've got all the other zones off. So I've got 4 zones. So we're just working on a single zone here. So now to edit this, this is just a simple sine wave of a hex layer. I press the edit button. Now, I can choose to edit the stage setting or the tone setting. Stage setting is things like the split, the velocity, the level, the pan, MIDI controller assignment, that sort of stuff. We'll scroll down to tone, hit enter. Now, if I scroll down again, we're going to go to layer edit. So layer edit, we can now access individual layers of this hex layer voice. So we get up to 6, we can edit them all simultaneously. We'll start with 1, sine wave. Now I can just scroll between these different voices. Let's try a sawtooth. Slightly different flavors, and we've got square waves. We'll stay on a not bad. I mean, remember, these are samples essentially, so they're not going to be, you know, your beautiful analog things, but they're certainly pleasant enough. Right, now we're going to scroll down and we can access the individual sort of synthesis functions for this particular layer, this single layer, or if we like, we can do all of them at the same time. The pitch gives us access to a pitch envelope and, well, if we go in, octave shift and coarse and fine tune, we'll come back out. Well, I think the filter is probably where we're going to get most interest. So we've got filter types. We've got 3 low pass filters. The first 2 are not particularly resonant. I'm guessing they must be 6 and 12 pole. Certainly not much higher. Number 3 is where it gets a bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the cutoff. I can use knob K1 to change the actual parameters, and knob K2 for the actual value. So if I just do some sweeps, bring the resonance up a bit, up a bit more. Well, let's go right up, shall we, to the top, or maybe just shy. Back up. It's getting a bit peaky. Quite resonant, and we've also got, if we go up to the other filter types, we've got bandpass and a high pass filter. And scrolling down, just to give you an idea of what other parameters we've got: envelope depth, velocity sensitivity. Then we've got the envelope itself, and the envelope in the filter and the amplitude are very complex. We've got attack time, attack level, 2 decay time and levels, well 3 in fact, so quite a lot of complex stages, release 1 and release 2 time, key follow, high key follow, etc. So there are a few things missing here. There's no oscillator sync, there's no pulse width modulation, a big fan of that. It's a shame not to see that. There's no wave sort of shaping or wavetable synthesis, which would be useful. So, I mean, but what you have is an enormous number of oscillators, basic though they are, available at your disposal. And remember, you can dial in PCM waves into those oscillators as well. So a quick example here, if I go to my overhead, I've got a basic voice, which is just, this is just a single sine, one layer, a single sawtooth. I bring in the other 5 layers. So that's now all 6 sawtooths with a bit of detune. On my second layer, I've also got the same patch, zone 2, switch that on, off. So now what I'm getting is 12 oscillators per voice. 6, 1 octave, 6 another. So if I want to do that Van Halen thing, I can, but I've also got the filtering capability. So that's just 2 hex layers together. You know, this is simple stuff. If you spend a bit more time programming up, you can get all sorts of complex stuff. So if I just go to this basic waveform, now I'm going to turn down all the waves. We're just going to start with 1. This is a sort of bandpass resonant sort of sound on a single wave. Start to bring another wave in, which is a higher clear sawtooth. Then I've got a couple of sine wave layers, which add a bit of beef. Then I've got this other layer. I'll take them all down. This is a kind of bandpass white noise resonant filter. And I've got a sort of clarinet. I'm getting these kind of strange, weird digital tones happening, and this is just 6 waves and a bit of resonance on the filter. That's all I'm messing with. So you can imagine, you know, as you get deeper and deeper into it, you can create some really complex tones, or some more traditional ones. We'll take a listen to some of the ones that are programmed into it so you can hear some more regular stuff. So listen to a few sounds here. I've an electric piano dialed in as the first one. Got the speed of the auto pan and the depth on K1 and 2. Something a little bit more crunchy. This is called 60s electric piano. Something a bit more dirty, very playable these, and they've got a good tonal range. Perhaps not as, you know, as brilliantly authentic as maybe contact instruments or something like a real electric piano, but certainly very playable. There's something about actually a lot of these tones that allow you to just stick the sustain pedal on and just let all the notes ring. They seem to be able to interact that way. There's something that you get with electromechanical keyboards, not so often with the sounds that emulate them, strangely enough. Let's take a look at something else. We've got something a bit more complicated here. This is FX Dancer, and what this does is show off more of the arpeggios and the effects. We've got arpeggios on certain layers, we've got lots of effects going on, lots more synthy tones, a bit more of a contemporary thing. Let's take a look at some more. This is quite a good one. This is the sustain pedal is mapped to the filter frequency. So now I can play. It's actually very responsive and touch. There's also a touch wah which just takes velocity and maps it, and this is actually quite a good wah clavinet sound, which is not something that, you know, you might have a use for, but very, very playable. We've also got an organ here, which is a drawbar organ, which allows us to use the first 4 faders on the drawbar to mess around with the harmonics. And then there's a chorus and reverb, but also hitting the sustain pedal switches between fast and slow Leslie. And there are some nice organs in here. So, you know, that's again another performance aspect. You could easily map it to one of the switches here or another foot switch as well. So here's something called Symphony Orchestra, and this is a bit of key switching, so hitting it hard brings in the timp. Again, you know, fairly sort of tidy and massive sounds. And the size of the polyphony means that we can layer up lots of stuff. Here's another example of the arpeggiator in action. We've got in the lower half, we've got this kind of Latin arpeggio sequence pattern. So just a note on how I can attach sounds to zones. I've got this patch here, which is a stage patch, which has got an organ loaded into zone 1. You can see zone 1 on, all the other zones are off, so back to zone 1. Now if I wanted to change the sound or the sound type, I can hit, let's go for synth various, and now I can scroll between all of the sounds in the synth various category, or if I wanted maybe drums, I can load between, or electric pianos, and there you go. Very, very simple way. And if I wanted to change the zone, I just go up arrow, then I can turn it on by pressing these 2 buttons together, and then I've got a sound loaded in there as well. So I think the master keyboard aspect of the Privia PX-5S is sort of rather undersold, and it's actually quite a big deal. So if I take you back to the original patch, I had this kind of string bed where what I've done is I've taken the resonance down, the filter down and the resonance up. It's got a very slow LFO running on it, so it's a nice in movement. Hit it a bit harder, and the piano comes in, harder still, and there's a vibraphone. So I've got 3 velocity layers. I'm bringing it right down here. I've also got an auto pan, which I'm affecting the speed of via fader S6 here, just assigned it internally. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the USB and I'm going to plug it into here, which is hooked up to the iPad, which I've got running. And I'm going to take the audio outputs of the iPad, plug them into mono line in, the stereo line in, and now top 2 octaves are playing the Animoog here. So I've got this sort of very atmospheric sound. Turn it up a bit, doing some interesting things, and I've also mapped fader K4, knob K4, to the frequency of the VCF of the Animoog. So if I perhaps try a different patch, now I can switch the Arpeggiator on. Take the level down. Arpeggiator is running internally and triggering just the top 2 octaves, applying it to the top zone. So, you know, just with that simple patch, 3 velocity layers and some external MIDI control and control of an external instrument, bringing it back via the input, the line inputs, I can create, you know, a performance there, and that's just on a basic level. So there we have it. This is the Privia PX-5X. A lot of stuff, I think you'll agree. I mean, I suppose the only problem is it's got a bit of an identity crisis. I mean, if you consider its build as a stage piano, The piano part of it is okay. It's not like the premium piano sound you'd expect. Keyboard feels lovely, but you've got all this other stuff. You've got these masses of other sounds which are really actually not bad. The electromechanical stuff is really quite playable and very much fun and tweakable with the knobs. You've also got this massively, you know, highly powered synthesizer, 256 voices, potentially with the Hex Layers, 6 oscillators deep. I mean, you can create some fairly complex stuff. You add the Arpeggiator, you add the media player, but there's all the other things we haven't even got into because there's just so much of it. It has a lot to offer. Perhaps if you were just buying it for a stage piano, it might not fill all of your needs. If you're buying it just for as a synthesizer, it might not fill all your needs, but the sum of the parts seems to make it pretty good value. Even saying that though, it's still $999 US street, probably about $890 UK pounds. Probably other currencies will scroll below. So, you know, it's not the cheapest instrument you can get, but the sum of the parts feels like you're getting more than perhaps you bargained for. It's just a question of whether you want this particular feature set. If you do, your quid's in. If you don't, then, you know, you might need to consider something else. So that's it for this SonicLAB. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There'll be a button just about here that you can click on to make it so. Thanks for watching.